When I say to people, "So what are you doing now that you've retired?" And they said, "Nothing." I know that I got a lot of work to do with them because that's not a good answer. And we got to look at why they're not doing anything. Is it that they didn't plan for retirement? And so they didn't really think about it? They didn't have any hobbies? They didn't have any interests? Is it because they're depressed? We know that depression is also a cause for dementia.
Ooh,
And
ooh.
so you want to treat your depression.
Hi, everyone. This is Diane Gilman, formerly known as the Queen of Genes on QVC HSM, but today the proud host of Too Young to Be Old podcast. And speaking of, we have an incredible guest, Dr. Mitch Clionsky, author of Using Your Head to Save Your Brain. He is an expert on Alzheimer's, and I think that is such a hot topic, Doctor. It's on everyone's minds. Well, at least according to statistics, it's on 80% of people's minds who are over 55. I don't know what the other 20% are doing, but they're in total denial, living in a cave somewhere. And you say that 50%, half of all the dementia, Alzheimer's cases are preventable. Oh, Dr. Mitch, please tell us how.
Happy to do so because dementia prevention, which is really the beginning of our book, Dementia Prevention, Using Your Head to Save Your Brain, is really where we need to go in the future. You know, when we think about dementia, which is, as you know, a neurological condition that's progressive, it's due to a brain diseases. The one most people know about is Alzheimer's disease, but that's only one of the types of dementias. Equally popular, equally common are vascular dementias. There's also what we call frontotemporal dementias, what Bruce Willis has, as well as dementias due to alcohol abuse, dementias due to head injury, dementias due to Parkinson's disease. There's a whole
Ooh.
variety of things under this big, kind of category called dementia. But the statistic that 1 out of 2 cases is preventable doesn't come from me. It comes from people a lot smarter than me. It comes from, first of all, a group of scientists in Great Britain and elsewhere called the Lancet Commission, 27, 28 different scientists who, back in 2017, went through all of the literature they could find and looked at where there was changes and the medical conditions that were causing those changes that produced dementia. And what they did was to identify 9 different factors that accounted for 40% of the cases of dementia. Well, they then did some more study, went back 3 years later, published in 2020, a 12-factor model that accounted for about 43% of the cases of dementia. Not to be outdone, here in the United States, we took those same factors and applied them to a group of people that were followed over time in what's called the U.S. Health and Retirement Survey. There's a couple thousand people in this group. They calculated 60% dementia prevention.
Okay,
So
okay.
being
So I got all these statistics
being
and
at
I'm
40%.
dying to know. I want to I want to stave off dementia. How do I do it?
Okay. Well, let me just say, you have 40%, 60%, which is why we cut the difference in half and say 50%, 1 out of 2. And the answer to how do you do it is a very complex answer
Make it
because
simple.
it's not just one thing. It's can be done, but you have to understand that all of the information comes from a lot of different areas of medicine. That's why when we did this book, my wife, who is the lead author and an internal medicine doctor and psychiatrist, Dr. Emily Clionsky, and I looked at the literature from neurology and psychiatry and internal medicine and cardiology and endocrinology, all the diabetes information, as well as several other fields, and put this all together, our model is actually more complicated or more complex, I should say, more extensive than the one from the commissions that have been set up, but it accounts for a lot of what's going on.
So let's just talk about it category for category. Diet. What can I do that is good for my brain?
Generally, diet is going to give you a lot less bang for the buck than most people think.
Ah,
Everyone wants to eat their way into better health in America. That's
oh,
just
yeah.
who we are. And yet, in the dementia prevention model, the diet piece is only one of the factors. And basically, if you eat a really good diet in terms of, olive oil and vegetables and legumes and not a lot of red meat, a lot of fish as opposed to it, you will do better than the people who eat a horrible diet. But you won't
Of all
necessarily do better
fast
than
food.
people who eat a regular diet. That's the paradox. So, is it good to eat a good diet? Yes. Is there a certain food you should eat? No. Is there certain things you should definitely avoid? Well,
How about
yeah.
high carbs?
Okay, carbs are not great for us, so in moderation, but they're not a huge no-no. It's mostly what the effect of our diet has on our weight, because obesity is what's causing a lot of the problems that are picked up by diet. So, people who are weighing a lot more than their body was designed to handle, which is where I look into obesity. It's not a shame. It's not something that I want to have people feel badly about, but I want to say, what is your body designed to carry? That's what you should weigh. If you weigh too much, more than that, it's going to screw up your blood sugar levels and likely cause you have type 2 diabetes. It's going to mess with your blood pressure. And unless you then manage your blood pressure, you're going to have vascular problems that'll lead to a variety of conditions, including dementia.
Yeah.
Going to cause you not to want to move. So you're going to spend your day sitting, which is not good for you at all. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that are secondary to not so much what you eat, but how much you eat, and maybe to some extent when you eat.
The next thing, so I am by nature an intermittent faster because I have no portion control at all. And I will give you a quick story. And this is how I know not to trust myself. So the last time I went to Paris, everybody, I always think, oh my God, what am I going to bring back for some person? Oh, chocolate. So I go to the best chocolatier that's run by these two ancient old Parisian twin sisters. It's super famous on the left bank, Rive Gauche. And I buy a double tier box of chocolates. I want to hand carry them on the airplane. Naturally, I don't want them to break. I'm sitting there, and of course, the plane is delayed and delayed and delayed. And now, an 8-hour flight is going to wind up taking 12 hours because we're just about to take off. We take off. I look at the menu. I hate the menu. Hate it for business class or first class, whatever. So I start thinking to myself, well, you know, you could just unwrap that box of chocolates and have one or two. So I take one or two. They're absolutely delicious. I put it back up on the overhead and I think, you know, why don't you just take the whole first row of chocolates and then it's going to look more symmetrical. By the time I was done with the flight, I had eaten that entire pound of chocolates. And so there is nothing for me in just eat intermittently, a little bit here and a little, I can't. So knowing I have no portion control gauge, I do intermittent fasting. Is that good for me? Is that good for my brain?
Intermittent fasting does have its pluses in terms of brain health. Again, it's what you're eating and how much you're eating and when you're eating it. And, there's whole books written on this. People go to great lengths to do this. I try not to get people so focused on this because the effect on our brain health is relatively low, and it usually causes us to get distracted from more important factors. So I got people come into me all the time. They say, "Oh, I don't do this and I don't do that. I don't exercise and I don't really do anything with my life. And I'm not really doing this. I'm not really doing, but I really eat well." And I'm saying, "Well, that's great, but that's not going to do it here."
So, how about alcohol?
So, alcohol.
Hard alcohol.
Yeah, that's been a real controversial area. Everyone agrees that drinking too much is bad for our brains. The question then becomes, how much is too much? And is it better to drink nothing rather than some? The original studies that came out said, for regular people, generally women do better on one drink a day and men in 1 to 2 drinks a day versus teetotalers. And they do a lot better than people who drink more than that. Well, that's gone through some revisions over the years, back and forth. By the way, the first studies were supported by the wine industry in France. So there may be a little bit of bias,
Yeah.
but everyone says, wow, red wine is great for you. We should start drinking red wine, even if we're not. More recently, the studies looking at things like MRI scans find that any alcohol makes changes in our brain, which is not particularly great. So we come down sort of in the middle of this. Neither one of Emily or I are teetotalers, but we do try to limit our alcohol to a drink a day, and it's really important to figure out what a is involved with. A drink is either 4 ounces of wine or 12 to 16 ounces of a regular beer, not a craft brew beer, because the alcohol content is twice as high, versus a shot of spirits. So that's the thing, because if you are like me, the temptation is to take the glass, put the ice in maybe, and just start pouring. And you say, well, I only had a glass of bourbon or a glass of scotch, but it's not really a glass. It's more than that.
Now,
Same
for
way.
me, I like sake, Japanese sake, and I'm actually obsessed with Japanese food. But I'm very strict about my limit of it. I don't like wine. I have a hard time digesting it, acid reflux, blah, blah, blah. So I think I'm within the safe zone. And I always think to myself, God, Diane, give yourself a break. You've given up red meat. You've given up this. You've given up that.
Yeah.
One drink a day? How bad can it be? But you know something? Obviously, it can.
And it depends on what your brain health and your physical health is like otherwise. I mean, when I see people are coming in and they're already in the early stages to mid stages of dementia, it's a full court press. We need to put every resource we have at slowing down or stopping the progression of this disease. For them, I don't encourage them to even drink at all,
Oh, yeah, I
because
agree.
why are we adding to the fire by throwing on more fuel? So, but if you're have normal cognition or just a little bit, those senior moments, those episodic times when you forget, why did I come into this room? Where did I set my coffee cup?
Why
Where's
am
my
I standing
glasses?
in
Oh,
front
they're
of
on
the
my head.
refrigerator? Yeah.
So those people could probably still get away with having a drink a day. What you don't want to do is you want to really avoid those episodes where you're really having a good time and you're having 3, 4, and 5, because that puts a lot of stress on your vascular system and on your nervous system.
Now, what we've talked a little bit about what not to do. What do I do? I use my brain every day. I'm writing my next book. I'm part of an anthology book, which has a lot of pressure on it to get it done. So I always hear if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Is that true? Does
Mental
exercise your brain?
activity is really important. It's only one of the factors, though, but it's a critical factor. When I say to people, "So what are you doing now that you've retired?" And they said, "Nothing." I know that I got a lot of work to do with them because that's not a good answer. And we got to look at why they're not doing anything. Is it that they didn't plan for retirement? And so they didn't really think about it? They didn't have any hobbies? They didn't have any interests? Is it because they're depressed? We know that depression is also a cause for dementia.
Ooh,
And
ooh.
so you wanna treat your depression,
I
and
didn't know that.
it's not just the initial depression, but, all of these things are interconnected. So when you're depressed, you typically withdraw from other people, so you lose the social connection. You don't do very much in terms of activity, so you lose the mental activity. You don't wanna exercise, so you sit or lie down most of the day.
You might eat junky foods because people have a lot of self-pity activity through foods, like, "Well, I deserve it." Yeah.
Their sleep is often disrupted. We know that getting a good night's sleep and especially breathing during sleeping, what we call sleep apnea, is really a very unthought of but very important factor. In fact, I think it's sort of the secret sauce for many people. I see so many people who stop breathing multiple times while they're sleeping.
And
And if that occurs more than 5 times an hour, the combination of not breathing or your oxygen level dropping by 4%, you're not getting enough air down your lungs, and therefore not enough oxygen gets attached to red blood cells, gets up to your brain, and you don't think very well.
yeah, so it does how does dementia, typically start? Does it start with memory loss? Does it start with freezing in the middle of a sentence or a thought? In other words, I think to myself sometimes, like, well, why am I standing in front of the refrigerator? And then I walk away, and then it's like, you wanted a Pellegrino. Okay. Um, and I start thinking to myself, oh my God, this must be beginning dementia. Help.
Don't look back
Um,
and say, "This is when it began for Diane." It was that Pellegrino moment.
It was that Pellegrino lapse. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's the issue of what's a senior moment? What's, when
yeah.
can we start getting concerned? And the reality is that all of us at times forget. That's part of the human condition. All of us at times search for words. All of us at different points forget where what we're intending to do, where we left something. We walk out of the house, we say, "Oh my goodness, I forgot my wallet. I got to go back." So it's not that's why using symptoms as the marker is not a good way to make a diagnosis.
Okay, that's a relief for sure.
Right. So it can be a sign, but it often isn't a sign. And if you're distracted, you're gonna make those kind of errors. If you're under stress, you're gonna make those kind of errors. If you've got sleep apnea, you're not gonna think very well. You're gonna have an ADHD kind of brain. You're gonna make those errors. If you're in pain, there's a lot of things that can cause people, aside from just normal forgetfulness, to have those errors. They're more of a ticket into evaluation than anything else.
Now, somebody like Bruce Willis, and you mentioned him, um, for us as the public or the fan base, it seemed to happen very quickly for him, and it seemed to happen very young, and part of that is the image he puts out for the public persona he is someone who's always in action movies and taking great risks and super active and violent, and he can handle anything. So when you get a star who now can no longer talk, and you think to yourself, oh my God, how can there be any hope for me? This guy was so vital and so healthy. The kind of dementia he has, did it come on that quickly, or was the family and his press agents just really good at hiding.
Well, first of all, frontotemporal dementia, which is the variant of dementia that he apparently has, is an earlier onset than vascular dementia or Alzheimer's dementia. So very often people do begin to have problems in their 50s rather than
Yeah.
in their 70s.
Wow.
As to the pace of the disease, from what I've read, and obviously I don't have the inside scoop, but what people were saying is that they were feeding him lines through an earpiece for a number of years over time because he couldn't remember the scripts and he was having trouble being able to use language. Now, again, I don't know that for certain, but that's what they were saying. So
Fascinating.
my belief is that with the cases I've seen of frontotemporal dementia, there's two types, two variants. One is a behavioral variant. So people who've got this lose control of impulses. They say inappropriate things more than they ordinarily would. They can have some temper outbursts. They can also have what's called hyperorality, where they just want to eat all the time and they just want to stick things in their mouth. The variant that it sounds like he has is a primary progressive aphasia, a loss of speech. And so they can't put the words together. And it's much more profound than what we're talking about, where you're searching for that specific word that you just want to use or someone's name and it doesn't come to the tip of your tongue.
It is it's different when you see it in a star because you think stars are always bigger than life. But recently I got on a flight, short domestic flight, 2.5, 3 hours. And the guys behind me, there were 3 seats behind me. So it was 2 sons and in the middle a father. Father looked normal, well groomed. They get him on the flight and he starts kicking my chair, like really forcefully, and then starts screaming obscenities. And I guess they knew he had Alzheimer's. They were trying to transport him from one facility to another. And I mean, he did this for 2 hours. The man was on the surface, if you thought it was a normal person, then they were totally out of control. But this was just a phase of, right?
It's always hard to know what's going on with somebody. Is it that they're having dementia? Is it a psychiatric
They said
problem?
it was dementia.
Did they?
Yeah,
Okay.
the 2 sons.
It may have been one of those things where he actually was a little too far progressed in the dementia that he should have been traveling by public
Yeah,
transportation,
that's what I said.
but it's pretty expensive to do private flights. So they might have said, well, if we have one of us sit on either side of him, we'll be able to keep that
But
calm.
they couldn't.
And it couldn't. Yeah.
So that was a very sad day for me because, when as you get older, and you and I are sitting here talking both with white hair, you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, is that going to be me in a couple of years? Oh no. So,
Yeah, it's very scary. That's why we need to start doing things early by taking a look, taking an inventory of where our habits and our lifestyle and our medical conditions are on target or whether they're off targets. One of the reasons why we developed and put onto both our book and for free on our website a 25-item questionnaire called Dementia Prevention Checklist that people can get for free. They can download it or they can in a PDF and fill it out, or they can fill it out online. And it's going to show them where in this model of dementia they're having strengths and weaknesses because we want people to be able to take action to essentially redevelop themselves to make the adaptations in their older life that are going to sustain them throughout the rest of their life.
so is that part of your statistics that say 50% generally of Alzheimer's and dementia patients could have reversed their situation?
Not so much. Reversal's hard. If you're
Oh,
traveling at a
yeah?
certain speed, you can drop your transmission if you try to throw it in reverse.
Yeah.
Slowing it down once you've got it, being able to stabilize it over time is a much more achievable goal, especially if you're also treating it with medications that we've had out now for more than 20 some years. We're looking to try to catch people even earlier than that because the earlier you identify what's going on, the more successful you're going to be at preventing decline in the future.
Now, I saw that there was, and I'm going to say I believe I saw it on CNN. I don't want to say I can't remember where I saw it in front of you, so I'm going to say I saw it on CNN that they had just developed a drug that could identify the very beginnings of Alzheimer way earlier than anything else. Do you know anything about that?
I do.
Oh, good.
No, this is not a drug. This is a blood test that you can get that'll tell you if you have high levels of a substance in your blood called beta amyloid. They also have some tests they're developing. They may have them out already. I don't know if they do, that look at another protein called tau, TAU protein. Now, what this tells us is that you may have higher or lower levels of amyloid years before you might get dementia. But here's the rub. There are a lot of people walking around with perfectly normal thinking who have high levels of amyloid. Number one. So it doesn't mean you're going to get dementia. Number two, there are lots of people with dementia who don't have high levels of amyloid.
That's a problem.
Right. So here's the third problem. What are you going to do differently, aside from worry, if you have a high score on this test?
I would assume I'm going to ask my doctor, what can I do to slow this process down, this decline? How am I going to stop it or slow it to a point where I can still lead a very full life for the next decade or longer?
But except it's not going to be any different than what you should be doing anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of comforting in its own way.
Years ago, there was a book that was written. You may know it. It was called "I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can."
Yeah.
The inside cover of the book, they start off with a joke. This man and a woman meet at a resort in the Catskills, and they're dancing with each other. And the man looks at the woman and says, I'm only going to be here for the weekend. She looks at him and says, I'm dancing as fast as I can.
Yeah.
What more can you do? If you are looking at all those factors that could cause dementia or increase your risk for dementia, and then working to adapt those and change those and minimize those, whether you have the amyloid or don't have the amyloid, they're equally good results are going to come out. Because we also find that even with people with diagnosed dementia, that making the changes in lifestyle will go a long way toward preventing decline. So you're going to do this anyway, is the point. I find that these are not only bad idea, they're not only not very helpful, but I actually think it's a mistake. Because it focuses us on a particular pathology, the Alzheimer's pathology. It sets us up for wanting to try to remove the Alzheimer's pathology to get rid of the amyloid, even though no one's ever demonstrated that it's the amyloid that's causing the dementia. What they find is people with high levels of amyloid often have Alzheimer's disease. So we thought if we get rid of the amyloid building up in our brain, it's a protein that builds in the brain, then we will be able to change the trajectory of the disease or fix it. Works in mice, does not work in people.
Damn.
So Again, but we keep looking and looking. We've been doing the same dance now for more than 25 years, coming out with newer and newer drugs. Most of the original ones all had too many problems with them in terms of side effects. They never made it to market. There have been two of these drugs that have made it to FDA approval in the last year or so.
Yeah.
One of them is no longer even being supported by Biogen, its developer, because the results are not that great with it. The second one, called lecanemab or Leqembi, has some evidence of slowing down progression when compared to taking nothing. It doesn't compare Leqembi with any of the existing medications that have been out for 25 years. So we don't know if it's better than what we already have. We only know it's better than nothing, which is the only question that the FDA has asked. Is this better
Okay.
than nothing?
So, as a layman who's up in years and is definitely considering this as a huge threat, because I'd like to go on for another 25 years or so. My best friend, one of my good friends, Iris Apfel, just passed this week at 102. And let me tell you what, that woman had it all. I mean, she didn't skip a beat. Um, what do I have to do to at least give myself, and I'm sure everyone else is going to want to know this too in the audience, the best chance at high level cognitive activity up here in my brain for as long as I possibly can? What do I have to do?
Well, there's about 20 factors.
Let's
This is
just
what
get it down to the top five.
okay. That's why this is such a complex question. It's an answerable question, and it's one that you can answer by, first of all, taking a questionnaire. So
Right.
that's part of it. For most people, number one, and if I was going to sort of rank order these, number one, if you have any medical conditions like diabetes or hypertension, take your medications and manage the disease so it has a minimal impact on your health.
Okay.
Oftentimes, that's going to also be involved with moving, exercise,
Okay.
walking is really, really critical. So get up off your bottom and get moving every day because you're going to live every day. You're also going to want to avoid excessive alcohol and also taking these medications from the family of benzodiazepines, the Valiums, Libriums, lorazepams, all of those medications are helpful in the very short run. So if you have to fly on a plane and you're frightened, great. If you have to get into an MRI and you're frightened, great. Take one of these medications, but it's not the way you're going to want to live your life. Do not smoke cigarettes. I can't tell you more than simply don't.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. Get your hearing checked. Turns out that hearing loss, even subtle hearing loss, is a cause for dementia, both
Yeah.
directly in terms of the stimulation to your brain, but also what do people who have hearing loss do? They withdraw, they lose social
They don't
contact.
socialize. Right. Right.
It's also fixable.
I don't know anybody that I've ever, including my mother, who at 94 years old was still driving a car and would take the hearing aids and throw them on the front seat. And I said, "What are you doing? This is crazy. I don't need them." I said, "You need them. What if you run over somebody? You can at least hear them screaming." Yeah, we had that kind of relationship. But I have had so many people around me age, lose their hearing, and absolutely refuse to wear hearing aids. So, okay, social engagement. Anything else to round this particular podcast out that we should be doing?
Probably the it's a hard question. But I guess the one other thing is we know that if you're 58 years or older, there's a 50% chance that you've got sleep apnea, that you're not breathing well while you're sleeping. That was just discovered about 3-4 months ago. And they found this through a large scale study of some 6,000 people from the general population. These are not people who came in complaining. Anyway, one half of them stop breathing multiple times every hour while they're sleeping. And if you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain, then your brain can't make an energy molecule. It also can't clear out the buildup of toxins that your brain cells produce during the day. And that's really important. That's your night cleaning crew that comes in, empties your trash cans, cleans off the counter of your table. So you want to get that checked out. And it's easy. There's home sleep tests, home sleep apnea tests. They're inexpensive, they're painless. One night in your own bed will let you know whether or not you have this. If I ruled the world, at age 50, everyone would get a colonoscopy. If you're a woman, you get a mammogram, and everyone would get a sleep study because we would save billions of dollars in downstream illnesses caused by these problems.
And if I was ruling the world, I would say looking at TikTok, baby kitten videos, and 1970s rock star videos is very nourishing for the brain.
I thought you were going to say it's going to rot your brain. That's where I thought you
No,
were going with that.
no, I don't want it to rot my brain. I want it to be good for my brain. They're even so crazy on TikTok that if you watch it for more than an hour at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., some strange face comes on there and says, "What are you doing scrolling through TikTok hour after hour in the middle of the night?" First time that happened, it was like, who is that? Oh my God, where's my privacy? But now I know. So, Dr. Mitch Clionsky, you are a treasure. This was an absolute pleasure. And we will list all the information for anybody that wants to get in contact with you, wants to take that test. And I can't believe that only 80% of people over 55 are concerned with Alzheimer, but okay, I'm definitely in that 80%. Thank you so much. You really, in your own way, took a gargantuan tidal wave of a health problem and made it more on a human scale. And I truly, as a layman, appreciate that.
My very well, my no. My pleasure.
Oh, better be taking that test. Thank you so much for listening to Too Young to Be Old podcast. The episode may be over, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at The Diane Gilman, or visit our website, thedianegilman.com. If you like the show, leave us a rating or a review and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And until then, don't forget, age is just a number. Together, we'll prove that we are all too young to be old.